The bouncer was large, polite, and doing his job. Sylvie Halston was large in a different way. The kind of large that came from years of operating in spaces where her husband's title opened every door she pointed at. She appeared beside me at the entrance like she had been waiting for exactly this moment. "She's not on the list," Sylvie said to the bouncer. Loud. Not the volume of someone clarifying information, the volume of someone making sure the people in line behind me heard the clarification. "Temps don't belong at client events," she added, smoothing her jacket. My face burned. I could feel the heat in my cheeks and the specific tightening in my throat that happened when humiliation arrived in public. I kept my voice steady. I pulled out my phone and opened the company event invite, the one that had arrived in my work email 4 days ago with my name in the recipient line. "Could you check this?" I said to the bouncer. Polite, factual. He looked at the screen. Then he hesitated. Then he stepped in front of me anyway. Physically. A wall made of someone else's authority and Sylvie's confidence. Sylvie smiled. The small, finished smile of someone who had already decided how the story ended. "Call your supervisor," she said. "Let's see if you're really invited." I called Victor Halston first, straight to voicemail. The specific voicemail of a phone that had been declined rather than missed. That sound was different if you had heard it enough times. I called the events coordinator. No answer. The phone rang 7 times and moved to a generic message. The line behind me had shifted, not toward sympathy, toward the impatient energy of people who had somewhere to be and were watching a situation they wanted resolved in whatever direction got them through the door fastest. I understood what the scene looked like from the outside. I stepped out of line, not because I had given up, because continuing to stand there while Sylvie watched and the crowd grew would make this bigger and louder and more available as a story she could tell later. I moved to the side of the entrance, away from the main cluster of people, and looked at my phone. Behind me, I heard Sylvie's voice. Lower now. Directed at whoever was standing nearest to her. "She's learning," she said. And then laughter. Soft and social, and exactly calibrated to carry. I kept my face pointed at my phone screen, and held every single thing I was feeling tightly inside, a locked room, in my chest. My name is Callie Mercer. I had been a temp at Halston Partners for 6 months. And tonight was supposed to be my quiet proof that the work I had been doing was real and visible and worth converting into something permanent. On my first day, they had handed me a temp badge. Cheaper than the regular ones. Different color lanyard. The kind of visible distinction that told the whole room your status before you opened your mouth. People talked around me in my first week, not at me, around me. The way you talked around furniture, you weren't sure was staying. Victor had changed that. Or he had seemed to change it. 3 months in, he had pulled me aside after I caught an error in a client brief that would have been embarrassing at best and expensive at worst. He had looked at me with the specific relief of someone who had been handed something just in time. "Do well," he said, "and we'll talk permanent." I had held that sentence like a contract. Back in the present, standing beside the entrance of a club I had been invited to and then publicly excluded from, my phone buzzed. Victor's name on the screen, a text. "Where are you? The client is asking for you." I stared at the message for a long moment. He knew where I was. He had just declined my call. He had been inside the event the entire time I was standing on the pavement, being told by his wife that I didn't belong there. He knew. My throat tightened in the specific way it tightened when a thing you had suspected but not wanted to believe confirmed itself clearly. I typed back, kept it factual, no emotion visible in the language. I was denied entry at the door. His response arrived in under a minute. 2 words. "Handle it." I read them twice, felt the coldness of them move through me. Handle it. Like the situation was mine to manage. Like being publicly excluded by his wife at an event he had sent me to was an administrative inconvenience I needed to sort out efficiently. Then a different number. One I didn't immediately recognize. "This is Marin from Client Relations. I saw what happened from the lobby window. Are you okay?" I read her message 3 times. The question was simple, 4 words. It was also the first time in 20 minutes that anyone had treated what happened as something that had happened to a person, rather than a logistical complication. My chest loosened slightly. Just slightly. Marin came through the side door. She was in her early 40s with the kind of face that had stopped performing pleasantness and was now simply honest. She looked at me standing beside the building with my phone in my hand and my expression controlled, and she understood the picture immediately. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. I told her. No rant, no emotional commentary, just the sequence of events in the order they had occurred. Sylvie's announcement to the bouncer, the crowd, Victor's voicemail, the coordinator's non-answer, Victor's two-word reply. Marin's face changed while I spoke. Not dramatically, the specific shift of someone whose existing suspicion was being confirmed rather than surprised. When I finished, she looked at the entrance doors. Then she turned toward them with the energy of someone who had decided something and was in the process of acting on it. I reached out and caught her arm. "Don't," I said. "Quiet, close." Marin stopped. "Not yet," I said. She looked at me. Not with frustration, with something that was closer to recognition. "You already have a plan?" she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I have the beginning of one," I said. Marin looked at me for one more moment. Then she nodded. I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel. The parking lot was half empty on this side of the building. Far enough from the entrance that nobody from the event could see me. Far enough to finally let my hands shake without it meaning anything. They shook for about 45 seconds. Then the silent tears came. Not the loud kind that felt like release. The quiet kind that felt like being wrung out. The kind that happened when your body understood something your mind was still trying to negotiate. Sylvie had wanted this. Had wanted me standing outside while the event continued inside. Had wanted the specific humiliation of public exclusion to tell me something clearly. "You don't belong here. You never did. You are temporary in every way that word means." I sat with that for the 45 seconds it deserved. Then I wiped my face with the back of my hand, checked the mirror, fixed my lipstick, looked at myself until I recognized myself again. Opened my notes app. My hands were steady by the time my fingers touched the screen. I typed the first line. Timeline, Sylvie Halston interference. Pressed enter. Started with tonight's date and the exact time I had arrived at the entrance. 3 weeks before the club incident, I had caught an error. It was in a client contract brief, a numerical discrepancy in the service agreement that would have created a billing gap significant enough to flag in an audit. I found it at 7:30 in the evening when I was the only person left in the office, cross-referencing a document I had been assigned to clean up. I flagged it to Victor before I left. The next morning, he had handled it. Quietly. With the specific efficiency of someone who understood exactly how close to the edge that had been. He had not mentioned my name in the correction thread, had not acknowledged the source of the catch to anyone on the team. But I had seen the look in his eyes when I showed it to him. The look of relief that needed to be contained, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that a temp had caught what everyone above her had missed. That was when I understood something. I was not powerless, I was useful, specifically, demonstrably, documentably useful. And useful was a different kind of power than title or permanence. I started collecting proof of what I had done, quietly, every deliverable, every caught error, every client interaction. My inbox buzzed. An email from Devin in accounting. "Callie, did something happen at the event last night? People are talking." I arrived the next morning at the specific time I always arrived. Not early, not late. The time that said I had a right to be here, and nothing that happened last night had changed that. I walked through the open workspace toward my station. 2 conversations stopped. Not both of them in obvious ways. One was subtle. The kind of pause that was almost a pause. The other less so. I heard the word temp and the word embarrassing in close proximity before the voices adjusted. My stomach turned. I kept walking, spine straight, face forward, the expression of someone who had somewhere to be and was going there. I sat down, opened my laptop, started the morning the same way I started every morning. The work was there. It needed doing. I did it. 40 minutes later, my phone showed a calendar notification. Victor, one-on-one. His office. Now, his office door was already closed when I arrived. He opened it from the inside and stepped back to let me in. I noticed immediately that he closed the door behind me. The specific closed-door meeting that communicated this conversation was not for anyone outside the room to hear. Victor sat down, adjusted his expression into something that was trying to be reasonable. "Let's talk about last night," he said. Victor said it with the tone of someone resolving a situation rather than explaining one. "You should have known the club operates by invitation protocols," he said. "Their list management is selective. It creates confusion when people arrive and their status isn't clear." "Their status. My status." I kept my face still. "I was invited," I said. Quiet, specific. "Through the company event email, with my name on the recipient line." Victor nodded, the way people nodded when they had heard you but had decided your information wasn't changing their conclusion. "There was some miscommunication about who the invite applied to," he said. I looked at him. "The invite had my name in the to field," I said. Victor's expression adjusted, the slight tightening of someone who is running out of the comfortable version of the conversation. "The point is," he said, "it looked like the company had a confused situation at the door. That reflects on the team." "I didn't cause the confusion," I said. "I was invited and then publicly excluded." Victor leaned back, the shift of someone returning to the position that required the least negotiation. "My wife doesn't lie, Callie," he said. The sentence landed the way he intended it to land. Final. Closing. The kind that was supposed to end the conversation. I looked at him. Then I said, "Thank you for the meeting." The email arrived at 2:15 that afternoon. I could see from the preview that it was a forwarded thread. Victor's name in the sender field, the subject line referencing a client brief I had drafted 2 weeks earlier. I opened it. Victor had forwarded my work to a senior contact with a message above it. "Happy to share this. I handled this account personally. Analysis is attached." My hands went cold. I sat very still at my workstation. He had not changed the document, had not reworded the content, had simply placed it under his name and sent it outward as though it had come from him. I opened the original file on my drive, checked the version history, my name, my timestamps, my edits throughout the complete development of the document. Then I scrolled to the bottom of the forwarded thread, a reply. From a different address. One I recognized from the company directory as Victor's home email. "Sylvie, good. Keep her away from clients. She's getting too visible." I read the sentence twice. Then I opened my documentation folder, saved the email thread, closed the file, sat for a moment with the specific understanding that what I was dealing with was no longer just a humiliating evening at a club entrance. It was bigger than that. Considerably. That evening I called Marin. Not from my work phone, from my personal one, at a time when the call would not appear in any office system. Marin answered. I told her what I had found. The forwarded email. Sylvie's reply. A specific phrase about keeping me away from clients. Marin was quiet through all of it. When I finished, I asked her one question. Carefully, without making it sound like I was looking for ammunition. Has Sylvie done this before? Influenced who gets access to clients or events? Marin was quiet for a moment. You didn't hear this from me, she said. I said nothing, which was the agreement. Yes, Marin said. There have been at least 2 other people, both women. Both described afterward as not a fit for client-facing work. One of them left the company within a month. I sat with that. Sylvie wasn't an angry wife who had been rude at a social event. She was functioning as an unofficial filter, sitting inside a corporate environment without a title or accountability or any formal oversight, making decisions about who got access and who got excluded, and using her husband's position as the infrastructure for all of it. That was not a social problem. That was a governance problem. Victor called me into his office a week after our last conversation. This time, the meeting had a different energy. Warmth. The warmth he used when he was offering something he needed me to accept. He talked about the permanent role, the possibility of it, the timeline he was considering. He said things like, when the time is right, and you've been doing really strong work and I want to see this work out for you. He was dangling it the way you dangled something in front of a person you needed to stay compliant and accessible. Then he said, just keep things smooth, Callie. Don't make the next few months complicated. Smooth. That was the word he wanted to wrap around my silence, around my decision not to speak about what had happened. around my acceptance of the narrative that his wife was simply managing social lists rather than dismantling careers. I nodded. I said, "Of course." I said it the way I would have meant it 6 months ago, with the surface that looked like agreement. But inside, I had already started detaching from the version of myself that needed his permission to exist here. My phone buzzed walking out of his office. An HR email. Subject: Temp contract review, scheduled meeting. The HR representative was polite in the specific way of someone who had been coached to deliver bad news without actually delivering it yet. She said they were evaluating team needs, said the contract review was routine, said they appreciated my contributions. I had heard the shape of this conversation before, not personally, but I knew its architecture. I asked for written documentation of my performance feedback before the review concluded. She looked mildly surprised. Then she said they could arrange that. 3 days later, the written feedback arrived. I read it twice to make sure I understood what it said. Glowing, specific, named contributions, client satisfaction notes. The kind of feedback that would make declining to extend a contract look like a decision driven by something other than performance. I saved it to my personal secure email immediately. Then I read the next section of the HR email. A single additional line that had been included almost as an afterthought. We also want to note that we received a concern about professional fit that we are reviewing alongside the contract evaluation. Professional fit. My skin crawled. I replied to HR and asked for the name of whoever had filed the concern and the specific nature of the concern. HR replied that they could not share that information. The next afternoon, leaving the building, I saw Sylvie walk out of the HR office on the second floor. Professional fit was designed to be unprovable. That was its function. Not to describe something real, but to create a category of concern that lived entirely in the space between documented and undocumented, that nobody could confirm or deny, that could follow a person through a review process without ever becoming specific enough to challenge directly. Unless you had facts, specific, dated, documented facts that built a picture in a different direction. I spent 3 evenings going through everything I had saved. The client brief Victor had forwarded under his name, the email with Sylvie's reply, the timeline I had been building since the club, the written performance feedback, the task log from 3 months of work. Every deliverable with my name attached. I organized them chronologically, labeled them, made the sequence clear and readable. Then I kept going. I listed every client interaction I had been involved in. Every positive outcome I had documentation for. Every situation where I had been the point of contact and the result had been favorable. I was building a counter-narrative. Not to present yet, to have ready. And on Friday afternoon, leaving through the lobby, I watched Sylvie step out of the elevator on the second floor and turn in the direction of the HR suite. I kept walking and added the observation to my notes with a timestamp. Marin found me near the copy room on a Tuesday. She looked both ways before she started talking. The specific body language of someone sharing information they had decided was worth the risk of sharing. She told me about the club's social committee, a loosely organized group that managed the guest list for events where the company held client tables. Not an official company body. No formal oversight, no documented authority, but influential in the way that informal power was often more influential than formal power because it operated without scrutiny. Sylvie ran the social committee, had been running it for 3 years, using it to shape who appeared at client events, who got introduced to key accounts, who became visible in rooms that led to opportunities. Last night wasn't a mistake, Marin said. She knew you were on the invite list. She made a decision. I nodded. I had understood that already. Then Marin said, in a lower voice, something else. Devin from accounting stopped by my desk this morning. He said something is about to be announced internally. I waited. An equity window, Marin said. Employee stock purchase program, new funding round. They're opening it to eligible employees. The word eligible hung in the air between us. Eligible, not temps. Devin's whisper followed me home. The internal memo dropped on a Thursday at 10 in the morning. I read it 3 times before I fully processed what it described. The company was opening an employee stock purchase program in connection with a new funding round. The program would allow eligible employees to purchase shares at a discounted rate within a defined window. The window was opening in 45 days. Eligible employees. The phrase defined as full-time staff and approved long-term contractors with a minimum tenure threshold. I was not eligible, not technically. Not under the current classification on my contract. But I sat with the memo for a long time that evening. I opened a spreadsheet, ran numbers, the discount rate applied to the share price, what a modest initial purchase would look like, what it represented in terms not of money exactly, but of position, of standing, of having something more than a temp badge and a month-to-month arrangement. Ownership was not just a title. It was a form of visibility that operated differently from performance reviews and manager recommendations. It was standing that existed outside Victor's authority to grant or remove. I looked at my banking app, opened my savings account balance, small, but not nothing. I closed the app and started thinking about what it would take to become eligible. The senior team meeting was on a Wednesday morning. Victor asked me to pull up a comparison analysis at the start of the session. Midway through, he gestured at me to hand him the printed pages I was holding. I handed them over. He presented the analysis to the room. My structure, my interpretation of the data, my framing of the client recommendation. He said I built and I analyzed and I recommended. At one point, a senior team member asked a clarifying question about methodology. Victor answered it. His answer was close but technically wrong in a way that mattered. I said nothing. I was holding a folder near the side wall, available as needed, which was where props stood. After the meeting ended, I walked toward the door. A hand touched my arm. I turned. Tessa Caldwell, Senior Operations Director. She had been at the back of the room, and I had noticed her watching while Victor presented. That analysis was yours, she said. Not as a question. I looked at her. Yes, I said. Tessa held my gaze for a moment, the expression of someone calibrating something internally. Then we need to talk, she said. Not here, somewhere that isn't this building. We met at a coffee shop a block north the following evening. Tessa arrived without a work bag, without her phone face up on the table. The body language of someone who had decided this was an off-the-record conversation, and meant it. She told me that Victor had been on the ethics committee's radar for some time, not for anything flagged formally. Patterns, small, consistent, recurring patterns of claimed credit, unusual behavior around who got access to senior clients, reports from previous team members who had quietly left rather than escalating. There's been enough murmuring that someone started asking questions, Tessa said. But murmuring doesn't create action. Documentation does. She looked at me. If you have documentation, she said, keep it somewhere safe, somewhere they can't access or modify. I nodded. I have documentation, I said. Tessa gave me one measured look. Then she stood up and picked up her coat. Before she left, she said, whatever happens in the next few weeks, don't disappear quietly. That's what they're counting on. That night, I opened my email. A new message from Victor. Subject line, contract update. I opened it. We are ending your contract early. Final day will be communicated by HR this week. I read the email 3 times. Then I put my phone down. Sat in the quiet of my apartment. My pulse was steady. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the racing heart I might have expected. Not the panic. Because somewhere in the weeks between the club entrance and this moment, I had stopped being surprised, had moved from the place where Victor's decisions were things that happened to me, into the place where they were things I had already accounted for. Grief was there. Real and specific. I had worked hard in that building, had delivered things that had mattered, had believed, longer than I should have, that good work was the language the right people were reading. That grief was allowed to exist. I let it exist for about 10 minutes. Then I opened my laptop, composed a reply to Victor. 1 sentence. Professional. Specific. The kind of sentence that became a document the moment it was sent. Please confirm in writing that this contract end is not related to my work performance. I read it twice. Sent it. Victor's reply arrived the next morning. Come in tomorrow to sign the exit paperwork. He hadn't answered the question, which was itself an answer that I added to my folder immediately. I arrived at HR the next morning with nothing signed. The exit paperwork was standard for the first 3 pages. Final pay, equipment return, standard non-disclosure language. Then I reached page 4. Section 6. The language was dense, in the way that dense language was sometimes designed to make important content move past unread. I read it slowly. The signing party agreed not to participate in company equity programs, including but not limited to the current stock purchase window, for a period of 12 months following the separation of employment. My hands went cold. They were trying to lock me out of the equity window. The one that was opening in 45 days. The one I had been calculating. The one that required eligibility I had been building toward. They had written a clause specifically designed to remove that possibility before I could access it. I set the papers down. I'd like to review this agreement with legal counsel before signing, I said to the HR representative. She nodded the way she nodded when my answer was not the expected one. You're welcome to do that, she said. But please understand that your last day remains today pending signature. I looked at her. Then my last day is today, I said, and I'll be reviewing with counsel before I sign anything. Marin called me that evening. She told me 2 things. The first was about the client, the account I had managed for the last 4 months, the one where I had developed the relationship from a cautious early engagement into something more committed. The client had specifically requested my involvement in the next phase, had named me, had said the work I had done was the reason they were considering expanding the contract. Victor had told them there had been a staffing transition and a new contact would be assigned. The client was not happy. Sylvie pushed to remove you, Marin said. Specifically, she told Victor you were getting too visible with external accounts and it needed to stop. I sat with that. The second thing, Tessa had reached out to Marin about the board's governance committee. They were gathering a picture of contribution patterns on specific client accounts. They had questions. They wanted written statements from people with direct knowledge. Marin said she was willing to write one. I'll describe your role accurately, Marin said. What you contributed, who knew, what happened. I thanked her. Then my laptop chimed. An email from Tessa. The board committee wants a summary of your contributions from the past 6 months. Can you prepare something? They want it by Friday. I spent Thursday evening building the summary. No emotion anywhere in the document. Not one word that could be characterized as aggrieved or retaliatory or personal. Just receipts, the client account history. Each touchpoint dated, each deliverable attached or referenced. The communications where my name appeared as the responsible party. The client feedback emails where I had been specifically mentioned favorably. The analysis Victor had presented as his original version with my timestamps, his forwarded version with his name. The email with Sylvie's instruction to keep me away from clients, attached. The HR complaint about professional fit filed in the same week as Sylvie's visit to the HR office, noted. The performance feedback, glowing, placed beside the contract termination notice to show the gap between what the record said and what the decision reflected. 6 pages. Clean font. Organized chronologically. I sent it to Tessa at 9:15 with 1 line. Please find the summary requested. I am available for any follow-up questions. Tessa's reply arrived the next morning. This is considerably stronger than you may realize. The committee is reviewing it today. I read the message twice. Then my phone rang. HR. Main line. Callie, we need you to come in for a meeting this afternoon, with our legal team present. The conference room had 6 people, 2 board committee members, 2 from legal, the HR compliance officer. Tessa, sitting slightly apart from the others. I sat across from them with my folder on the table and my hands folded on top of it. My heartbeat was loud enough that I could feel it in my ears. My face was completely still. They walked through the summary I had submitted, asked clarifying questions, reviewed the email chain, asked about specific dates and specific interactions. I answered each question the same way I had been practicing. With dates and document references, letting the record speak rather than letting my feelings speak. One committee member was looking at the email thread between Victor and Sylvie, the one with the "keep her away from clients" line. Miss Mercer, she said, can you confirm this email was received in your work inbox as a forwarded error? Yes, I said. The timestamp and forwarding chain are in the attached metadata. The committee member looked at the other board member. Then she said, this creates material risk for the company. specifically regarding client relationship integrity and undisclosed spousal influence on personnel decisions. The room was quiet. The board member beside her looked at Tessa. "We're pausing the termination," he said, "and freezing Victor Halston's operational authority pending full review." He looked at me. The cliffhanger in my chest resolved into something harder and more certain. The review took 11 days. On the 12th day, the HR compliance officer called me. She explained the board's determination, that the termination had been initiated under circumstances that reflected undisclosed conflicts of interest and potential retaliation, that the company was making a series of corrections. One of those corrections involved me. My employment classification was being reviewed retroactively for the tenure of my contributions. Based on the documented work history, scope of responsibilities, and client relationship record, the committee had determined that my effective role had functioned at a level qualifying for a different classification. The reclassification was being applied retroactively to the date of the original hire, which made me eligible for the equity window, not as a favor, not as a consolation. The compliance officer's language was specific about that. It was a correction. The classification had been wrong and was being made accurate. I purchased shares through the program. Every dollar documented, every transaction clean, the exact amount I had calculated on the evening I first read the memo and opened my bank app and looked at the small balance that was not nothing. Then, 2 days later, Tessa forwarded me an event announcement. The same club. A charity gala. Sponsorship tables available for purchase. I read the announcement twice. Sat with something that felt very much like the beginning of an idea. The charity gala sponsorship form had one field I had not expected. Under the table purchase section, there was an option for dedication, in honor of, followed by a text field. Legal, standard. The kind of acknowledgement charities included to encourage memorial giving and personal tribute. I read the field, read it again, then I filled it in. The table was purchased under my name, paid for with my own money from my own account, documented completely. The dedication line read, "In honor of Sylvie Halston." The sponsorship form accepted it without complication. It was a common type of entry. Honoree names appeared on event materials, seating charts, and program acknowledgements, which meant at the gala, on the printed seating chart and in the program, a sponsored table would carry Sylvie's name. A table she had not bought. A donation she had not made. A presence in a room she had controlled, built entirely from resources she did not have. Her status had always been borrowed. Built on Victor's position, on informal power, on being in the room without being on the record. The night of the gala, I walked through the entrance. Leadership badge. Shareholder of record. Name in the program as a sponsor. The scanner cleared me without hesitation. I found my seat at the front. She had banned me from the club like it was a kingdom. So I bought my way into the only thing that mattered, ownership.